you're creating a benevolent, decentralized AGI at SingularityNET. Could you parse those terms for our listeners? So, AGI, probably most listeners know, but even a quick intro to that, just in case, could be good. But then these ideas of a decentralized AGI and a benevolent AGI, I think those terms we should definitely dig into.
Absolutely. And I want to add none of these terms has an absolutely definite, well-defined meaning. These are things that
Mhm.
we're fleshing out as we go along, which I think is a feature, not a bug. I mean, just as the definition of life is something biology is fleshing out as it moves forward, which is is
Mhm.
is just fine and doesn't stop people from doing synthetic biology or molecular biology or whatnot. So, in terms of AGI, to start, that's a term that I launched onto the world in 2005 with a book titled Artificial General Intelligence, which was an edited book of papers by different researchers doing research aimed at AI that can generalize in the sense of making big leaps beyond its programming and its training. And there's a whole mathematical literature aimed at defining exactly what does AGI mean. When you start to formalize it, you find, okay, humans are not totally general intelligences. Like, we can't run a maze in 700,006 dimensions very well, right? We can barely figure out what each other are thinking and feeling most of the time. On the other hand, we can leap beyond our training and programming much better than a worm, a dog, or Chat GPT for that matter. Which, while powerful, is powerful mostly because its training data is so big. It doesn't leap that far beyond its training data. Decentralized is a word that is big in the blockchain and
Mhm.
crypto sphere. And what it really means is not having any central owner or controller who's sort of the puppet master and pulling all the strings of the system. So distributed computing is a more limited notion. I mean, Google or Microsoft within their server farms uses large scale distributed computing, but
Mhm.
there's one corporate entity controlling it all. And on a computer science level, there's often a central controller sort of disseminating stuff among all those different machines and controlling them. Decentralized control generally would need a distributed infrastructure, but it goes beyond that, right? And then blockchain is one sort of tool that can be used to enable decentralized control of a network of compute processes. But of course, you could talk about decentralized control of groups of people as well, right? And so that's gets into anarchist political theory and a whole bunch of other fun topics. But I mean, clearly, U.S. is a less centralized system than mainland China or than an ant colony, right? So that notion is widespread in any sort of multi-agent system.
Mhm.
Benevolent, of course, there's a whole field of ethical philosophy, and people struggle to define these things in a precise way. But what we're looking at here is, in an AI context, is making an AI that is, broadly speaking, for the good of sentient beings rather than purely or primarily for the good of the small number of parties who owned and created it. And of course, not many entities are out there saying we want to make evil AI that will kill and torture everybody. But you
Mhm.
do have, I mean, a country creating AI to increase its own position relative to other countries, where we have a company creating AI with the proximal goal of maximizing shareholder value. That's not necessarily malevolent. I mean, companies and countries seeking their own interests have done great things in the world. On the other hand, it's different than creating AI with a goal of broader good behind it. And this often slips in the real world, right? Like OpenAI, whose everyone's favorite target to beat up on now. And I mean,
Mhm.
they've done incredible things. Obviously, so I mean, my hat's off to them for having the balls to launch, you know, the first really powerful generative language model upon the world. On the other hand, they started off with a rhetoric of being open source and
Right.
nonprofit for the good of the world. Now they're closed source and closely allied with a mega corporation who's closely allied with the intelligence organizations of a particular country, right? So that
Mhm.
not that they're bad guys or want to hurt people, they're good people who want the good of the world, but this illustrates how just the realities of human society and economy let you sort of shift. Kind
Yeah.
of, it's a slippery slope from you start out wanting to save the world and you end up, well, the easiest way to build stuff is to serve a sort of more narrow set of goals, right? And that's the challenge with the benevolent part of benevolent decentralized AGI. Not so much bad guys who are like, I want to build killer robots to exterminate everyone, but just the tendency to shift
Sure.
toward a narrower perspective to get done.
Yeah, one of my favorite cutting quips about OpenAI is to call them closed AI. uh,
Yeah,
I
you have in mathematics, you have the notion of a Clopen set, right? So that's they're a bit like that. But yeah, with GPT-4, really, they didn't really tell you what's happening behind the scenes, right? I mean, you can guess what sorts of things they probably integrated with the base transformer model, but they really don't. Their paper doesn't actually tell you what's going on. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
even short of open sourcing the code, they haven't really disclosed what the algorithmics are, which
Yeah.
is pretty far in the opposite direction, right?
Yeah. So with SingularityNet, the hope is that your SingularityNet ecosystem will be able to maintain more benevolence, more openness, I suppose, than these other kinds of entities
Well,
like
yeah, that's
OpenAI.
right. And I think open source is doing great in the AI world, generally speaking. I mean, the vibe in AI
Yeah.
is most algorithms do get open source. Most innovation happens in published papers that are published on Archive or elsewhere. And even though GPT-4 is the smartest LLM out there at the moment, I mean, others are rapidly on its heels with open source models. And the VC community, which I have a lot of issues with, has, to their credit, opened their minds to open source business models and is putting a bunch of money behind people building open source AI tools, right? So I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of hope in that regard, but I do think open sourcing the code isn't all you need to do, right? So there's code, there's the data that code is trained on, and where that comes from, what's the ownership model, what's the compensation model behind it. Then there's the sort of live network of machines which is running the AI code, and who's hosting and owning and controlling those machines. And all these things need to be done in a democratic and decentralized way. But I think the success of open source code and open science in the AI field now gives a great start in that direction. I mean, along with the software tools from the SingularityNet ecosystem and others that handle some of these other aspects of the problem.